Guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, January 29th, 2025, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan on the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before we do get started, guys, let you know that we are a news podcast. We do pride ourselves on being the reputable podcast to be able to go to sites that have award-winning journalism that do their due diligence. We do not do sensational news like Fox News, The Blaze, The Daily Beast, whatever extreme left or extreme right you get your views from. We simply give you the facts, nothing but the facts, and allow you to go from there. We do try to watch our language on this show, but let's be honest, words do fly. At the same time, guys, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, welcome to the land of confusion. Before we actually get to where it actually makes sense, well, I'll just be honest, none of this entire podcast is not going to make sense whatsoever. But we're going to start with Oklahoma first, because Oklahoma is in the news for two reasons. One, their superintendent has a major hard-on for Donald Trump. And number two, he wants a publicly funded religious school. Yes, a publicly funded religious school. But before we get to that, he also wants to be able to track immigration statuses through schools. Yes, we've come to that part of the game.
Information about the immigration status of parents or the immigration status of children?
Well, look, all of the above, because what we're trying to do is ensure that we have the information to properly educate Oklahoma kids. We're going to put Oklahoma kids first, and we've seen an influx of illegal immigration into our state. We've got to know where that population is, where the migrants are, and to make sure that we're allocating resources and personnel appropriately. So we're looking to gather that information in order to best do that.
So you did an interview with a station in your state, and when you spoke about gathering this information, at no point did you say that it was for allocating educational resources. Your rationale for turning over information was solely focused on enforcement around illegal information. I want to play what you said.
Look, we will not allow schools to be sanctuary schools anymore. We will turn over information to the Trump administration so that they can make decisions on where illegal immigrants are, how big the problem is. So we have already announced that we're going to do those things. President Trump is doing that nationwide, so we're happy to work with him on that. And look, we're going to make sure that his policies are enforced.
You also wouldn't rule out raids in schools. So which is it? Educational resources or enforcement of immigration policies?
Oh, it's absolutely both. I've been crystal clear on that. President Trump won a clear mandate, and he is fulfilling his campaign promises very quickly by deporting illegal immigrants. And part of that is he said schools are no longer going to be sanctuaries. We're not going to allow sanctuary schools here in Oklahoma. He's going to get that information so he can make the decisions on how to deport families together. And that's something that's very important as we move forward. And of course, you've got to have information to educate kids, which again is one of our top priorities here. So you got to be able to do both things at the same time.
So, I mean, talk about the information hand over then, because if you're talking about allocation of resources, it's not about individual information. Would you be willing to hand over people's identities or just the number of undocumented parents broken down by school district?
Well, let me be clear. Yeah, I'll give President Trump whatever he needs to carry out his agenda. It is a law to not work with law enforcement. That would be a felony. Of course, we're going to work with ICE. Of course, we're going to work with President Trump. He's got a mandate. He is moving quicker than any other president in history to fulfill that mandate, that promise to the American people. We will work with law enforcement. We will work with ICE to ensure that President Trump is able to carry out his mandate.
But you don't have to ask for this information of parents, just to be clear. You do now because you're passing a rule. But after you turn over information to the Trump administration, what are they going to do with it?
Well, look, that's President Trump's decision, not mine, but we stand at the ready to help him fulfill his campaign promise. And reality is we've seen, hey, the left-wing media lost their mind about separation of family, and I know a lot of that was embellished years ago, but it's so important for the Trump administration to have the data. Where are the families? Where are they located? And when they're making these decisions, I know that they want to keep the families intact. This helps them understand where the families are, where the kids are, and so they can continue to fulfill that. But look, we got to put Oklahoma and American citizens first. Their kids, we've got to make sure resources are allocated appropriately. And look, we've had a record amounts of fentanyl in all our schools. We literally had a migrant arrested on domestic terrorism charges last year in one of our schools. We've got to make sure this information is readily available for law enforcement. And we applaud President Trump for the tremendous job he's doing in bringing law and order back to this country.
Oh, wow. Sir, just could you, take it out? I mean, we know you can fit it. We know you got no problem gargling. But could you take it out? I mean, why am I surprised about the superintendent, Ryan Walters? Because not only does this man want to, again, in the next story we're going to get to very soon, not only does this man want to turn around and bring religious schools to the forefront, he now, again, with the raids that are going on, which we will get to momentarily, but now he's like, oh, we'll let ICE come in and question every immigrant to see if they're here legally or not. And that's the scary part of this whole thing, that Trump has empowered ICE to almost the same extent of the U.S. Marshals, except the U.S. Marshals go internationally if need be. Now you're asking ICE agents to go in not only to jobs, not only to places of business, not only to local areas of gathering. You have no problem with them going to churches. You have no problem with them going to schools. Why? Because, again, as you heard Superintendent Trump ball gurgler Ryan Walters just sit there and say, well, our Lord and Savior, Daddy Trump, is going to make America great again because we're going to go after immigrants because of American safety and the fentanyl crisis. What are two things that don't equal up? But here's the thing that I'm going to say before, I move forward. It's like, what is it with the whole scare tactics thing? That, oh, well, we have to make sure that you're here. And I'm like, this screams Gestapo so much, so freaking much. It screams Gestapo. It's like, papers, please. That's all I hear from ICE people going up to kids, much less adults. Papers, please. That's all you hear, because Lord knows they've already started. They've already started going in places. They've already started arrests. And I just got to ask Americans, do you feel safer? Do you feel like your jobs that they were doing that you have no problem doing now? I mean, because I'm going to tell you right now, produce ain't going to be what you think it is. But like I said, before I get into that big old thing, Oklahoma again in the news for wanting to push forward with a publicly funded religious school. I can't make this up.
We have some breaking news out of the Supreme Court agreeing to take up a case that could blur the line now between church and state. The justices will hear arguments out of Oklahoma over whether the state can approve the country's first publicly funded religious charter school. NBC's Lawrence Hurley joins me now with more on that. And Lawrence, as we understand it, the lower courts have been pretty clear about where the law in Oklahoma stands. Tell us more about the specific case here and how it has weaved its way through the courts.
Yeah, I mean, a key issue here is that the Oklahoma Attorney General, Gentner Drummond, who's a Republican, he took the position against his own party to say he thinks this proposal is blatantly unconstitutional under both Oklahoma law and the U.S. Constitution. So he actually took this case to the Oklahoma Supreme Court, and the court basically agreed with him and said, yes, that the Oklahoma Constitution itself on its own protects or prevents the state from endorsing any kind of sectarian, provide funding to any kind of sectarian issue. So they thought it was a pretty close case. So then the charter board that approved this took the appeal up to the Supreme Court, which, as you know, has a 6-3 conservative majority that's very friendly to conservative religious issues. So that's how this case got up here, and we'll see what happens during the oral arguments that will be coming up this year.
So what will you be watching then? Because as you rightly point out, there's a 6-3 conservative majority rule right now at the Supreme Court. And we have always thought that separation of church and state was kind of a hard and fast line. What is your interpretation of where this goes in the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I mean, this whole issue of the separation of church and state is one that, conservative legal experts and lawyers and people involved in that kind of conservative Christian legal movement have long thought is kind of overstated. And of course, they have this Supreme Court that's friendly to their arguments, and they've actually chipped away at this in several cases that have come up over the last few years. So it's quite possible this case will be another one of those cases.
So let's think about this for a second. Oklahoma wants to be a publicly funded religious charter school. Now, outside of the fact that it is the biggest oxymoron that anybody can come up with, why? Because we had a separation of church and state. I know I'm sounding like I'm beating an old horse that should have been sent off to the glue factory a long ass time ago. But why are we still talking about it? You can have your private religious schools. You can have them, no problem. You can have your public schools, no problem. You can have your charter schools, no problem. What you cannot have is a hydra mix of all the three. If you want to be, and again, I say it's because this is how conservatives get to public funding. It's the dumbing down or the privatization of public schools. And conservatives do what they do best. If they cannot make it work, they will basically choke it dry to where it breaks down, then somehow still blame people because it's broken down. It's not getting any better. Not offer any alternatives except at the very end when it's on life support. Oh, well, let's privatize it. Let's privatize it so our friends on the outside will be able to get access to government money and do it legally. Because it's all about this whole thing called school choice or school vouchers or school choice, depending on where you are. I know here in Tennessee, it's school vouchers, where conservatives have sat there and said, oh, do you want your child to go to any school that you want? Here's this voucher. Take this. They can go to any school they want to. Will this cause overcrowding? Yes, but they won't care because those vouchers and how those vouchers are paid for, they're paid for by taking funding from public schools, which is government mandated. And public schools are already getting starved for funding as it is. And now, because some parents believe that, hey, I should have a say where my child goes to school, but I don't want to pay for it. But the state will. And that's how we got to school choice. Now, here's the thing about school choice. School choice doesn't work because school choice, if you have another way of paying for it outside of taking government funding from public schools, go for it. But you don't. And conservatives don't, because conservatives said, how do we kill two birds with one stone? How can we starve public education, but still satisfy our needs at the same time? That's where school choice came from. So why am I saying that now? Because religious schools are starting to come about. And I'm going to be honest with you, I hate religious schools. I do. I have a bone to pick with religious schools for various reasons. Although, again, I think that religion shouldn't be a part of one's education. I think that should kind of be on the outside of it. But that's just me. I personally I would rather worry that my children are getting the proper education to be successful, critical thinking adults in life than having to worry about whether or not they have actual Bible study this week. Again, just me. But at the same time, guys, school choice is destroying public funding. And Oklahoma, because they have a lot of those moms for liberty type people in the worst places, may actually get this passed. But it is being heard by the Supreme Court. I hope to God they reject it because, again, it's a conservative-leaning Supreme Court. It can go left, it can go right, but at the same time, it is effing scary that it made it that far. I'm just saying. But moving right along, guys, like I said, getting back to ICE, or should we call them the modern-day Gestapo, because Trump, in his idiocy, decided on day one that he wanted to do the largest deportation of illegal immigrants in history. What he did not say, which again is what's got to show in this next clip, is that, well, he started, but he also missed a few spots we're going to point out.
We're going to start with the latest in President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown. Administration officials say they made close to 1,200 arrests Sunday, and that half of those who were apprehended had violent records. ICE officials have said they are targeting criminals, but that other migrants could be detained in this process.
We're also learning about directives given to ICE field offices across the country. Sources tell NBC News they've been told to enhance their routine operations by meeting a quota of at least 1,200 arrests per day. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us now from outside the Roosevelt Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. That's essentially New York's main intake center for migrants. Gabe, I know that sources are telling NBC News that the Trump administration is now planning major sweeps there in 3 cities per week. Which cities specifically would be targeted?
Hi there, Morgan. Good afternoon. Well, yes, we're learning that the Trump administration is planning 3 operations per week. We've already seen Chicago earlier this week, today, New York City, and then this Thursday, Aurora, Colorado, a place that President Trump has repeatedly talked about during his campaign stops. And then another 3 cities next week, although those haven't been confirmed just yet. Now, Morgan and Vicky, this is all part of the Trump administration really ramping up these enforcement operations really throughout the country just in the first few days of his since President Trump took office.
Gabe, I know that you actually saw one of the enforcement operations firsthand and also witnessed the arrest of a 25-year-old from Mexico. Authorities say that that man had a lengthy criminal history. We're going to take a look at part of your report and talk on the other side.
Agents move in, arresting Christopher Lara from Mexico. ICE says he has a criminal record, including convictions for home invasion and aggravated battery.
This is the one that's coming in.
NBC News also getting rare access to an ICE processing center, where we found Lara arriving in handcuffs. He denies the charges against him, saying he deserves a second chance.
I went to school my whole life here, from preschool all the way to my senior year.
He says if he's deported back to Mexico, he'd leave behind a 5-year-old daughter.
Gabe, tell us more about what you experienced and what that man told you.
Well, look, Christopher Lara said, that he didn't want to be deported, of course, but I did speak with ICE agents and said, look, he does have a criminal history and many convictions. And even though he has been in this country for many years, that he is undocumented and he is here in this country illegally. And while it might be a difficult situation, the ICE agent I talked to said that they need to follow the law. I spoke with President Trump's border czar a couple of days ago as well, and he did say that he expected collateral arrests in addition to those with criminal histories. And those collateral arrests are people that without violent histories that may be swept up as part of these operations.
All right.
So I just got to, point out a few things here. Did he just sit there and say that ICE agents have a quota? Yes. They did. ICE agents have a quota. Oh, but the board czar, who we covered last year, who sat there and had no problem going after all immigrants, even though he didn't say it, but he also sat there and said, well, there might be collateral damage. How so? That aren't all ICE agents following up and going up to these people? Papers, please. Papers, please. I'm just going to point this out. How do you have collateral arrests if you have the information? Because from my understanding, ICE has been empowered to go everywhere. ICE can stop anybody that they believe is an illegal. At the same time, unless they have documentation on hand, what is ICE going to do? Detain them, and then what? Send them back where they came from. I'm sorry, that sounds like a piss poor way of fulfilling a promise that you couldn't do because, well, you're a racist. And at the same time, all we see are people of a certain ethnic group. Correct me if I'm wrong, folks. Did you see Russians? Did you see, I don't know, anybody from the Middle East? Did you see anybody that might be from the Far East? Did you see anybody that might be from an African continent? So I'm just going to point this out. The places they've been raiding are the largest sanctuary cities, which 2 of them have immediately displaced they don't like Trump. So what does Trump do? Trump directs his ICE. He directs ICE, the ICE portion of the federal government to do what they do best: screw up everything and say it's a part of the process. Oh, and by the way, Trump did turn around to there and say that told Guantanamo Bay to get ready to have a lot more people coming his way. It is the modern day Gestapo, folks, because again, he has to fulfill his campaign promises. He has to turn around and say, well, I'm going to do the largest deportation in history, where, no offense, previous Democratic presidents have deported more people than Trump. Clinton did it. Obama did it. Trump basically did not. His deportation numbers have been way less. Obama's was at least more than him. But of course, Trump doesn't like being in second or being called small or being called anything but successful, which he never was, is now turning around and saying, well, on day one, we are going to deport all the illegal immigrants. And by doing what exactly? Others who are probably legalized, naturalized citizens, probably people that have been born here, will get caught up in the process. And then what? Because it's amazing how ICE, it's amazing how the boards are all saying, well, if you just came through the proper channels, you wouldn't have this problem. But what are the proper channels? Was it not Trump when he was in office that had the border problem, that he instituted that title amendment to where he basically shut down the border? He could have sat there and sent immigration lawyers, judges, clerks to actually fix the immigration process for those fleeing from war-torn countries or countries that have a lot of violence. He could have solved that problem, but he didn't. Because much like every other conservative out there, you guys have no answer to our immigration problem. Because unless you're a Native American, everybody's an immigrant. For those who are born here, our ancestors came from somewhere. Again, unless you're Native American, then hey, welcome home. But for the rest of us, yeah, your ancestors came from somewhere else. But that being said, conservatives never have an answer for the immigration problem. Oh, well, we have a major immigration problem. We have criminals that are among us that are bringing in drugs and all this stuff. The largest fentanyl busts have been done by white people, and yet none of them seem to be sitting in ICE in an ICE holding cell right now. At the same time, you get to fix the immigration problem. Trump and conservatives for the next 4 years will not talk about immigration outside of deporting illegals. And I'll tell you what happens I'm going to tell you exactly what happens. The quite opposite of what happens when Trump believes deporting all these immigrants is going to save the economy. Nope. It's going to tank it. Job markets are going to basically be vacant. Produce, which I talked about earlier, which again, a lot of it is actually held by immigrants, which now, if you're deporting those individuals, produce is going to be higher because, well, crops are going to lose out because there's not enough workers to pick them, to sort, to ship, logistics, all of that will take a freaking hit. At the same time, your cost of eggs will not go down, which, by the way, also a BS reason, because Trump turned around and said, well, I thought I could get it down, but turns out it's not that easy. It's not that easy. And yet, was he not on the campaign trail lying to every one of his flock? Oh, we're going to get the cost of groceries down just like that. We're going to get the cost of energy down just like that. Trump sold you a dream, and over 70% of you believed it. And that 70% right now are trying to call to the rest of us when we tried to tell you, but now it's like, no, we're minding our own business and enjoying the show. But that's not the only reason we're calling this episode of the podcast Land of Confusion. Oh, no. Trump decided to lay out a policy and then quickly rescind it.
Administration saying it's freezing all federal grants that might conflict with Trump's executive orders. Grants, the White House says, do not include any individual Americans receiving aid, but couldn't really explain exactly what that means. New White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt addressing this memo in her first official press briefing today.
This is not a blanket pause on federal assistance and grant programs from the Trump administration. Individual assistance, that includes, I'm not naming everything that's included, but just to give you a few examples, Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, food stamps, welfare benefits, assistance that is going directly to individuals will not be impacted by this pause.
Now, New York Attorney General Letitia James and other attorney generals across the country are suing the Trump administration for the pause.
Later today, I am leading and joining with my colleagues, my fellow Democratic attorney generals, in suing this administration to stop this illegal freeze of essential funds for our state. We will not stand for any illegal policy that puts essential services for millions of Americans at risk. And we work tirelessly overnight to ensure that that does not happen. Our lawsuit will seek a court order to immediately stop the enforcement of the OMB policy.
White House correspondent Karen Travers joining me now for more. So, Karen, let's talk about how significant this lawsuit is from the attorneys general.
Okay, so we're going to stop it there because, again, this is just part one of all of this, right? So, again, Trump tried to come out and I didn't follow Project 2025, but you really did, because he wanted to put a halt on federal assistance freezes. That caused mass confusion. Does this halt Medicare payments? Does this halt Medicare? Does this halt Medicaid? Although the funny part is, Medicare websites went down after this was let out. At the same time, people who are on food stamps, EBT cards, were worried about how they're going to feed their kids, how they're going to feed their families. Those that were going to college were worried about federal Pell Grants and if they were going to get those. And again, mass confusion. And the newest White House press secretary didn't help do shit. I'm not going to talk about all of them. Well, that's your job. Your job is to talk about it. Your job is to let us know what that idiot in the White House is doing. And yet you seem to learn from the predecessors of Sarah Huckabee and Mike Myers and the rest of the idiots who had no problem lying to the American people during their tenure. And you, madam, might as well be fresh off the Fox News factory loading with default blonde setting already attached. So, what wound up happening, folks? Well, outside of a judge blocking the freeze, the Trump administration decided to rescind it. Why? Because, well, it was a lie. If it was just going to go after individual assistance, well, that could be anything. Individual assistance could have been Medicare and Medicaid. Two of your biggest voting blocks come from individuals that are on those two things. And if their services are cut off, well, it's not like they can call Trump on speed dial and actually put it back up again. At the same time, EBT, food stamps, medical assistance, those things could have been halted. Federal Pell Grants, because trust me, the conservatives are working on trying to make sure that higher education is out of reach for for the middle and lower class families. Excuse me. They're working very hard to make sure that happens. I'm just saying. So, of course, the best thing he could have done right now was freaking backpedal, because it was only going to get worse, because we are hip to the bullshit. You are going to follow Project 2025 to a T, sir, to a freaking T. And we shouldn't be surprised about it, because, again, you have sat there and said, I don't know anything about Project 2025. I don't. I even tried to come out with this bullshit Agenda 47, which is just Project 2025 light. We know. Don't lie. I mean, be a conservative. You're going to bullshit properly. But it doesn't help to lie when you're literally following the playbook. So, yes, it did get rescinded. Medicare and Medicaid websites are now back up. Folks outside that brief interruption are back to things. But this right here, guys, is a warning sign that they are planning to go after certain things. Remember when Paul Ryan was Speaker of the House? He salivated over Medicare and Medicaid. Conservatives wanted to get their hands on it because they wanted to privatize it. It is outside the military. That's the next big thing on the U.S. budget. And the military gets a blank check, which, by the way, they failed every audit since the beginning of time. And yet their budget increases every year. Figure that one out. But again, Trump already tried to go after And I'm just telling y'all, he's already tried it once. Do not think he will not try it again. He'll just refine it a little bit better this time. But speaking of Trump and his idiots, we do have some confirms. Can't believe we're doing this, but yeah, we got to do this. So there are some confirms that we do know. Unfortunately, Marco Rubio has passed his Senate confirmation somehow to be Secretary of State. Look, he's a safe choice. Rubio doesn't have any scandals. He tried to go toe for Trump. Trump literally sat there and called his wife ugly. Marco Rubio tucked his tail in, and then he began to brown kiss his ass to the Secretary of State. He is a safe choice because he will be a Trump loyalist. Trump can do no wrong in his eyes, and he will brown nose his way up until the part that all he can taste is that chocolate. Yes, that's what I'm getting at. That's how much he brown noses. But yet, he's Secretary of State. Scott Bessent has been confirmed as Secretary of the Treasury. Now, one thing about Mr. Scott Bessent that we should all be worried about is that, well, one, if you are Secretary of the Treasury, the question of minimum wage comes up. This man has no problem keeping it where it is.
In America, we have over 22 million workers who are making less than $15 an hour, and nearly 40 million people in our country earning less than $17 an hour. Shamefully, the federal minimum wage, despite the efforts of myself and other people here, have not been raised since 2009 and remains an unbelievable $7.25 an hour. Will you work with those of us who want to raise the federal minimum wage to a living wage to take millions of Americans out of poverty?
Senator, I believe that the minimum wage is more of a statewide and regional issue.
So you don't think we should change the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour?
No, sir.
Okay. Mr. Bessent.
Yeah, he said it. We don't. And again, here's the crazy part. If you're asking questions, number one, yes, he is a millionaire. Number two, millionaires don't believe, some millionaires, actually a lot of millionaires and billionaires, are disconnected with reality. They don't look and go, oh, so the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. We can get away with paying it. You know, we used to say a long time ago, how did China get away with basically winning the production war? The fact that, you know, they pay their workers less, they can produce materials faster and ship faster than what we can do in the States. And U.S. companies are like, cool, we'll just have China do our stuff and they'll send it back over here. No one ever questioned why China ever paid its workers a low wage. I feel like now we're understanding Chinese people. Because again, $7.25 for the minimum wage in 2025 is effing criminal. It is. Because the minimum wage, for all those that don't know, or maybe too young to know, the minimum wage was basically the lowest amount you can get paid, but be able to sustain yourself with food, shelter, and utilities. That's what the minimum wage was designed for. It was the bottom line. This was basically supposed to be the line above poverty. And it hasn't changed. And yet corporations are screaming record profits. CEOs are making an assload amount of money for very little time of being at a company. Whereas the workers who actually make those companies millions of dollars, again, some of them are getting paid, well, crappy. And here's the reason why I said, why Mr. Bessent was saying, well, it's more of a state or regional way, because conservatives love to do this little hypocritical double Dutch jump rope move. They'll jump in when they want to enforce something. They jump out when it's like, hey, man, it's got nothing to do with us, a state issue. Well, some cities and states have raised their minimum wages. But here's what happens when it's federal. When it's federal, all states have to comply. All states. So let's just say in a perfect world, the federal minimum wage is basically pushed if you factor in inflation, if you factor in time of how long it's been since production, GDP, all that stuff, if you factor that in, let's just say that we would increase the federal minimum wage to anywhere between $27 to $30 an hour. Now think about that for a second. $27 to $30 an hour. That would push a lot of Americans closer to $60 to $75,000, give or take a dollar. 60 to 75 grand a year would raise a lot of Americans. Here's the thing. Every state would now have to adopt that as a minimum wage. Well, there's just some companies that can't afford that. So that's a business. If a business needs workers, business will have to pay. What they're really saying, what the rich people are really saying is we don't want to dip into our profits to pay the workers what they want, what they are really worth. So a minimum wage would force companies to pay the workers a livable wage because, again, I know in my home state of Tennessee, the average median income is like $45,000 to $50,000 a year. $45,000 to $50,000 a year doesn't even get you in the door of a 2-bedroom apartment in Tennessee. $45,000 to $50,000 a year won't even get you into a high efficiency apartment. Again, the reason why they will not do this is because raising the profiles of Americans, which again, we've always been on a capitalist society, which means that as long as we're spending, the economy is good. When we're not spending, the economy goes bad. Prices go up, things get harder. That's how you have a Great Depression or a recession, if you want to be honest about it. But it's amazing to me how millionaires, if you ask a millionaire, and again, one that is disconnected with society, oh, I don't think we need to raise the minimum wage because people are doing well. No, the people around you are doing well because you are surrounded by millionaires and billionaires. So, of course, financial woes are not your problem. But what also is a problem here is that for those who pay taxes, if you're high earners or you're a corporation, you're loving it right now because the corporate tax rate and certain loopholes are instigated for you guys. So right now it's Christmas. And again, Senator Raphael Warnock decided to take this one step further and ask him, would you raise taxes on that? You can pretty much guess what he said.
From the Tax Policy Center, the largest tax cuts from extending the Trump tax bill would go to those with the highest income, especially those in the top 1%, making more than $1 million per year. In fact, the top 1% of owners will take home roughly 1/4 of the benefits of the law, and the top 5% will get almost half of that. Do you believe that the wealthiest 1% of Americans deserve or need an additional tax cut?
Senator Warnock, I greatly enjoyed visiting with you. I think probably a better way to look at it is on a percentage basis. And when I think about the distributional aspects of the Tax Cuts and Job Act, that most of the benefits accrued for the working and middle people as opposed to the upper ends. In absolute dollars, as you just read, that is correct, but I think it's important to look at it in percentage terms.
So you believe that the tax cut that provided 1/4 of the benefits of the law to the top 1% and top 5% getting almost 1/2 actually benefited those at the bottom more than it did those at the top. Is that your testimony?
I believe that in 2018, 2019, that the households in the bottom 50% of income earners, the wealth increase for those households was three times higher than the wealth increase for the top 10% of Americans.
So we should continue to move in that direction and give more tax cuts to those at the highest. You have talked about high deficits as a national defense problem, and I agree with that. I think we need to be fiscally responsible. We need to work to close the deficit and bring the national debt under control. In 2013, Congress extended the Bush tax cuts for everyone except those making more than $400,000 a year. This bipartisan decision saved the Treasury $600 billion, helping to narrow the deficit. Do you agree that ending the tax cuts for those making more than $400,000 would help close the deficit and reduce our national debt?
Senator Warnock, I do not. I believe that you would capture an inordinate amount of small business people who largely are in that cohort of 400,000 to a million.
So you wouldn't cut it off at 400,000. What about $1 million?
That again, I believe these are small business pass-through owners, and I believe that we, as I said before, Wall Street's done great. It is time for Main Street to do well, and small businesses need to drive what I call the reprivatization here away from this government spending.
I agree that.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have now seen the conservative double dutch of bullshit. Again, literally points out, and it's just, it's, how can I say this ever so nicely? He tries to point out Reaganomics works. I don't get conservatives. I don't. How in the blue are you guys still trying to say Reaganomics works? Oh, if we keep pouring at the top, it'll somehow trickle down and the lower glasses will be filled because we're giving the top everything, not realizing the top has a hole in it. Actually, it's not even a hole. It's a bottomless well. And it's amazing to me that, again, historically, when the rich have paid more, America's economy has thrived. When the tax cuts used to be, when the tax rate for corporates and high earners used to be almost as high as 67 to 70%. And here's the thing, as high as that percentage was, they were still rich. The thing about it is, at the lower side, you had tax breaks for middle and lower class individuals. You had tax incentives for homeowners. So what happens? When individuals such as those have money in their pockets? They buy things they need. They buy houses, they buy cars, they buy groceries. They're consuming. The money goes back into the economy and the economy does well. Whereas Mr. Besant is trying to sit there and say, well, back in 2018, the people at the lower class had a 3 times rate of income as those at the top. Well, it's easy to say that when you're staring down. This is, again, a millionaire who has been confirmed, unfortunately, as Secretary of the Treasury. Here's a scary thing I keep saying, guys. I always worry what happens when a rich man is at the forefront of America's piggy bank. It's like the other guys, I can't think of his name right now. The last guy was Treasury. Either way, he just had a douchey face that just needed to be punched. But at the same time, this man will now be in charge of financial protocol. A millionaire watching the piggy bank. Except, he's not Scrooge McDuck. Moving right along, Pete Hegseth, a man who literally and figuratively should not be Secretary of Defense. But thanks to Trump in training, J.D. Vance, who is now Vice President, he was the deciding vote on this man. But here's the one thing about Pete Hegseth, outside of, serving the National Guard, wanting to bring a warrior mentality back to our armed forces, doesn't believe that women should be serving the armed forces due to possible conditions to the unit, has nothing to do with the fact that he's maybe sexist, abusive, and possibly has a couple of essays under his belt. I'm just saying. But the biggest thing that he has said to his Republican cohorts, because he has a little bit of a drinking problem. Matter of fact, he's basically an alcoholic. He has sat there and said, if I am confirmed to be Secretary of the Defense, I will be sober. Let's point something out here, folks. This man has admitted he has a drinking problem, has admitted that there was questionable things in his marriages, has cheated on his second wife with his now new wife. may also be an alcoholic. At the same time, he can't even answer a simple question like this.
This is a quote from you that you said, "I sit before you as an open book." Yet you haven't actually said what personal challenges it is that you've overcome when you've been asked about them. So I'm going to give you an opportunity here to be as forthright as you say you want to be. So while leading Concerned Veterans of America, there were very specific cases cited by individuals about your conduct. I'm going to go through a few of them, and I just want you to tell me if these are true or false. Very simple. On Memorial Day 2014, at a CVA event in Virginia, you needed to be carried out of the event for being intoxicated.
Senator, anonymous smears.
Just true or false? Very simple. Summer of 2014 in Cleveland, drunk in public with the CVA team.
Anonymous smears.
I'm just asking for true or false questions, true or false answers. An event in North Carolina, drunk in front of 3 young female staff members after you had instituted a no alcohol policy and then reversed it. True or false?
Anonymous smears.
December of 2014 at the CVA Christmas party at the Grand Hyatt at Washington, D.C., you were noticeably intoxicated and had to be carried up to your room. Is that true or false?
Anonymous smears.
Another time, a CVA staffer stated that you passed out in the back of a party bus. Is that true or false?
Anonymous smears.
In 2014, while in Louisiana on official business for CVA, did you take your staff, including young female staff members, to a strip club?
Absolutely not. Anonymous smears.
So, is it accurate that the organization reached a financial settlement with a female staffer who claimed to be at a strip club with you, and there was a colleague who attempted to sexually assault her? Was there a financial settlement?
Senator, I was not involved in that. I don't know the nature of how that played out.
But you understand there was a financial settlement for a young female staffer who accused another member of the organization, not you, of sexual assault in a strip club.
We have multiple statements on the record referring to that.
But you claim you were not there when that occurred.
Absolutely not.
Now, the behavior I cited, if true, do you think that this behavior of intoxication, going into these type of establishments, women on your staff being so uncomfortable that they have to file these sort of harassment claims, do you think this is appropriate behavior for a leader?
Senator, the overwhelming majority of anyone who's worked for me, including the on-the-record statements that have been submitted to this, with their name on it, on the record, men and women who worked with me every day, are the overwhelming preponderance of evidence that testify to my leadership and professionalism in leading Vets for Freedom and Concerned Veterans for America. Okay. My leadership has been completely impugned on these veterans organizations that did fantastic work.
Mr. Hegseth, I'm not even going to go into the. I'm not even going to go into the accusations.
And we managed our financial books with integrity across the board. How many people? Everybody who runs a campaign.
I have limited time. I'm not going to get into the accusations that come from Fox News. I know you have some of your Fox News colleagues here. There were multiple instances of accusations against you about drinking on the job.
All anonymous, all false, all refuted by my colleagues who I worked with for 10 years at 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. and everything.
The challenge here for me, Mr. Hegseth,
only seen me be professional
is when there is discussion about personal challenges and you admittedly had issues with heavy drinking. It's hard to kind of square this, to square the circle here. It's kind of a difficult thing to do. Let me ask you, if I have about 90 seconds left here, if you had to answer these questions about sexual assault against you and your drinking and your personal conduct, would it have been different if you were under oath?
Senator, all I'm pointing out is the false claims against me.
Okay.
Ooh, again, I hear that conservative Fox News double Dutch jumping BS being out. I consider myself an open book. Senator Kelly, but I can't answer your question on whether or not the improprieties of how my leadership, and of course my sobriety, which I've already admitted that, hey, I might have a problem. I may have a problem, but hey, if I'm confirmed to be Secretary of Defense, I promise to be clean and sober. Here's my problem with this. If Hegseth, who again by now has been confirmed to be Secretary of Defense, will he be taking a breathalyzer with him wherever he goes? Will he be joining AAA meetings either in person or by Zoom? Will every vehicle he ever has to actually have to have a tag on it, just to make sure he's not because here's my thing. And I'm not trying to make fun of those that have alcoholic problems. I know they can plague individuals and families and things of that nature. But you, sir, cannot be in a position of power over our armed forces while you yourself, your judgment and decisions will be heavily questioned because you might have had a few. I'm sorry. It's one of those things to where, how did this happen? Well, Hegseth is from Fox. At the same time, guys, people from Fox seem to be making their way into this cabinet. And I keep pointing this out. This man turned around and said he was an open book and could not answer one goddamn question. All he had to sit there and say was, do you think this was a lapse in judgment? Because, oh no, God forbid you can't actually be a human and make mistakes. God forbid that people in leadership are always right. I mean, look at Bush in Iraq. I'm just pointing things out. But the crazy part about this is now he's the Secretary of Defense. And Fox News can sit there and say, well, one of our former co-anchors is now sitting in the White House with our Lord and Savior, Donald Trump. And they will say that. But going back, though, guys, keep in mind, Sean Duffy, Secretary of Transportation, he might as well be a Boeing fanboy. Why? Well, because he wants to bring Boeing back. For all those that have been following my podcast, for the last couple of months, Boeing has not had a good end of 2024, especially with planes losing pieces, planes not actually landing, planes not passing security safety checkpoints. And yet, if you're wondering, yes, Sean Duffy does have stock in Boeing. How is that not seen as a conflict of interest? I do not know. But he wants to basically bring Boeing back to the forefront. How is that not a thing? I'm just pointing that out. How is that? How? But again, he's confirmed. Boeing is safe for now. Also, Kristen Noem has been confirmed as Secretary of Homeland Security, doing ride-alongs with ICE agents. She was plagued with scandal because she talked about killing her puppy. I find it interesting that a woman wrote a book about killing her puppy and she was not put in prison. Yet Michael Vick was literally dog walked through social media and yet had to serve time in prison. I wonder what the difference was. But again, Homeland Security. Also, John Ratcliffe, CIA director, a man who has no experience in spycraft and international affairs, and yet is heading one of the most nation's counterintelligence units out there. Again, Trump supporter. Lee Zeldin has now become the EPA administrator. This man's job, and one job alone, is to strip the EPA of its abilities. Which, again, a lot of Trump's friends, especially in the coal and oil industry, will love to hear that the EPA is basically going to be reprimanded to nothing more than a headline. Although if Trump has it his way, he would actually try to close down the entire department. So where does that leave us? So far, there's still a handful of other people to be going along, but that's the cabinet so far. Each of these people completely and utterly unqualified, but Trump has learned. And this is what I kept saying in my podcast so many times. If Trump somehow ever got reelected, you don't give a would-be dictator a second chance at wanting to play the king. because the second time he's learned, and the second time is even worse because he's not going to pick anybody. He is going to pick those who are going to be utterly loyal to him. Case in point. But getting back to Hegseth for a second, because DEI programs, which again is the white folks' way of saying the N-word, because, they don't understand DEI. They just understand that Fox News, The Blaze, and everyone else has said, DEI bad. DEI hurts white folks. That's all they hear. Whereas diversity, exclusivity, and inclusion are needed because, well, it is an uneven playing field. That's why affirmative action, equal opportunity was there, to ensure that you did get hired based off your merits and not because you were of your skin tone. But, if you're white and you're a guy, you don't really have that problem. But if you're not, outside of a white woman, well, you're going to understand exactly what I'm getting at. That being said, DEI programs try to go after Tuskegee Airmen, which again, in the Air Force curriculum, there are videos and classes that were dedicated to Tuskegee Airmen for their flight maneuvers and other things. They tried to remove this. Talk about whitewashing history. They tried to remove this from the curriculum, but since then, and due to the outpour of reaction and the fact that everybody's going, what the frack are you thinking? It has been restored. Enter our new Secretary of Defense that decided that he's going to leave a comment.
First black military pilots and heroes who fought racism to protect our country. Now the Air Force is restoring the use of training videos about the Tuskegee Airmen after a short-lived attempt to edit courses to align with President Trump's dumping of DEI initiatives. Senior Pentagon reporter Louis Martinez joining me now. So, Louis, why would the training videos of Tuskegee Airmen misalign with Trump's rollback of DEI initiatives in the first place?
Well, Kara, this video is being played during basic training. Essentially, that's when a lot of the what we call DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion training takes place. And it's only a few hours, actually, in what is like months worth of training. But it's because President Trump had issued an executive order ordering a review of all DEI across the federal government and actually putting a stop to it. That's exactly what the Air Force did. And so they looked at all of their training programs and they suspended them. And so it just so happened that this video was being played during those classes. Now, what we have today is that did not happen, according to the Air Force's top general, General Allen. He is saying that he's calling it a rumor that this video was actually ever removed. What he said is that I put in place a review immediately and keeping in line with the president's vision. And now we are continuing to play this video as part of our basic training. Now, note, he says basic training as opposed to DEI training. And I think that's part of how this story blew up, is that it was presented as a removal of training from all training, whereas in fact it was just focused on DEI. But again, a lot of concern about this just because of the story, and as you said, the storied nature of this hallowed unit.
So newly appointed Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also got involved, right? What did you make of that?
Well, this morning he arrived at the Pentagon and he was greeted by about 30 reporters and photographers, and he made substantial, for him, I mean, for an arrival ceremony, he made some lengthy comments, excuse me. And what he said was that essentially he reaffirmed that he is going to eliminate what he calls DEI from the military. Now, he has been very open about this in his interviews prior to being nominated and after his nomination, that he is focused on making the military lethal, making it a focus of their energy, and that DEI training distracted the military from that focus. An argument can be made, again, that the major part of the training is lethality. But again, he wants to make sure that in his view that this message is carried through because President Trump ordered it, and that he's going to carry through and ensure that DEI has no place in the U.S. military.
It's a common theme, isn't it? It's a common theme. We don't want DEI anywhere in the U.S. And it's so funny that every year there's always that one buzzword that napkins just seem to latch on, whether it was woke, whether it was critical race theory. Now the new one is DEI. which Hegseth, being the new minted Secretary of Defense, could have sat there and said, you know what? Or once he put down the bottle of whiskey, well, you know what? We messed up. This has got nothing to do with that. These instruction videos are great. We need to leave them in for basic training in the Air Force. We apologize profusely. You know, what anybody else would do when you know you made a mistake. But oh no, not Hegseth. Hegseth is learning from Trump. Never apologize. Keep repeating something that's got nothing to do with the situation and then walk off like you said something important, i.e. conservatives. And yet I didn't expect Hegseth to come out and, do the right thing and say, yeah, we messed up. Yeah, it was our fault. Yeah, probably should have done this differently. But hey, at least now, again, should wake some people up. It honestly should wake some people up about how DEI is being handled. All the wrong way because a group of white folks feel oppressed. Think about that. You've been privileged for so long, something different comes along and you feel oppressed because it doesn't include you. It's not for you. And yet, because it's not for you, it doesn't include you, it doesn't make you feel like you're top of the food chain, now all of a sudden it's bad. Why? Because it shows that, hey, you're not the most important person in the world. Which kind of lets you know that a lot of people that are opposed to DEI may have just been spoiled ass brats. Who knew? But move right along, guys. DeepSeek. I almost said the wrong word. DeepSeek, I should say, has came out and basically changed the way that a lot of people are looking at AIs, especially when you hear about, the cost of getting this and how it's outdoing other chat GPT AIs.
Shockwaves across the artificial intelligence industry. Tech stocks taking, let's just call it a dramatic plunge on Monday as a new chatbot called DeepSeek hit the market, causing concern among investors.
Yeah, top AI chip maker NVIDIA losing nearly $600 billion in market value. Yeah, that's billion with a B there, the biggest one-day U.S. stock loss ever. And nobody knows this stuff better than ABC's chief business technology and economics correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis.
Thank you, Gio.
I am so glad you're here because backstage we were talking all about this because so much is going on.
Yeah.
President Trump calls this a wake-up call. Mm-hmm. What happened? Like, why is everybody freaking out?
Yeah.
And why is the stock market freaking out?
Okay, so you have this company called DeepSeek. It was developed in China. It is an artificial intelligence chatbot, kind of like ChatGPT. It can talk to you, have a conversation, assist you. What happened when DeepSeek went public and emerged inside of the app stores is that people started to play around with it and they realized, wait a minute, this actually works pretty well. And it was developed for far less money. They're using much less sophisticated chips than the chips that are being used here in the U.S. to develop technologies like OpenAI and ChatGPT and Google and Meta. And it costs less money to create. It costs less money to run. It uses less energy to run because artificial intelligence, one of the things a lot of people don't know is that it does take a lot of energy. It's using a lot of energy to produce the answers that it does so quickly.
It's not just the software, it's the hardware.
It's the hardware, exactly.
Wow. Okay, so what do we know about how this all came to be in China? And, what are the big questions still looming about it all?
So it's an interesting story. It's still developing, by the way. And again, this is coming from China, where we don't have a way of verifying the answers to all of these questions in the way that we might with a U.S.-based company. So it was built by a team of engineers who were originally building something for a hedge fund, a financial company, and they built this and put it out into the market. They say it took only a couple of months, $6 million. Okay, $6 million is a big number, but in the U.S., OpenAI, Google, Meta, they're spending billions of dollars to build the models. And now that it's on the market, it's the #1 app right now in the Google and Apple App Store. People are downloading this. It's ahead of ChatGPT, which is the other big artificial intelligence app that people are downloading. And it's really sent shockwaves through the market, I think, because there was this idea that the U.S. was just naturally going to dominate here. We have regulations on China that keep them from getting access to some of our top technology, but they found a loophole. They found a way around it. And that is part of what really freaked out Wall Street yesterday.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up because...
So I got to stop it right there because to me, it's like, wait a second. So China basically created an AI that is faster than what we have in the US, and they did it cheaper, and it's already causing companies like NVIDIA to lose well over close to more than $500 billion. And yet, all I can sit there and say is I find myself wanting to do the Iron Man line. You know, China was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps. Guys, it's technology. I hate AI, personally. I think that AI needs to be destroyed just because the ramifications on what it can be used for to me is too great. But then, I'm an IT guy. What do I know? That also being said, though, from a business standpoint, this just goes to show you that America has to redo their thinking when it comes to trying to sanction things from not being concerned. We tried to sanction Iraq from having its own nuclear program. Guess what? Iraq has its own nuclear program. We tried to sanction China from not doing AI, realizing China just looked at us and said, "You do know you still owe us, right?" And what does China do? They create something. There were China developers that created something that was literally better and cheaper. It's like DeepSeek and TikTok basically were sent from China and said, "Here, Americans, enjoy." So what are they going to do now? Are they going to ban DeepSeek because it's China-based? I mean, you saw what happened with TikTok until TikTok, bit the knee and kissed the ring. But it just goes to show you that America has this, we're number one in everything. And, well, we're not. We're not number one. Matter of fact, there's nothing out there, and not to quote the newsroom, but there is no evidence out of the support that America is the greatest country in the world. It's not. Even more so that we still want to claim Star Spangled Awesome when, well, we're kind of slow compared to other countries and their innovations. But it's amazing how they all freaked out to where you had companies on this side of the world spending massive amounts of money into the same AI market, and yet you have one out there that was built cheaper outdoing them. You know what that tells me, kids? You can throw a whole bunch of money at a solution, but if you're truly gifted in hard work, you will beat money every time. Although NVIDIA losing more than $500 billion kind of puts a smile on my face, especially the stock market. But speaking of things, guys, that you should be worried about, and again, this is Trump's doing. Trump has decided to wage war on Colombia. Basically trying to do. He tried to do it, and again, this was canceled. He tried to put a tariff on Colombia, and then he realized, oh crap, most of my coffee beans come from this country. For those that are drinking coffee, prices are still going up, even though Trump did cancel a tariff on Colombia. He also tried to do one on Mexico. He also tried to do one on Canada. And not forgetting, because Trump loves the word tariff, he loves the word tariff, but he does not understand what the frack it means. And at the same time, the people are going to feel it is us. This is why I wish sometimes Trump would just get someone to sit down with him. And I think they've already tried this multiple times, but give it up about tariffs. They've never worked. Historically, they have not. At the same time, much like his tax plan, only helps out a certain few, but it ain't us. But also, like I said, Trump's had a busy second week, and this again comes as no surprise, especially for those that were, how can I put this ever so nicely? For those that may have had to leave the military due to vaccination issues, well, you've been welcomed back. And for those who are trans, well, we're back to don't ask, don't tell. The other way.
Well, for more on President Trump's new military policy targeting transgender troops, let's bring in ABC News senior Pentagon reporter Louis Martinez. So, Louis, this is the other action the president took today, in which he said for military readiness, he has tasked Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth with coming up on how a ban on trans troops would be implemented in policy. Is that right? And what are you hearing from the Pentagon about it?
No, Terry, I think that is exactly what's going to happen. Last night's executive order, what it did was it rescinded President Biden's order that put back in place the ability for transgender service members to serve openly. That has gone away, but nothing has replaced it. Instead, we've seen some timetables that are listed out in the order for about within 30 days for Secretary of Defense Hegseth to come up with a plan to implement this strategy or what is laid out inside of this executive order, which effectively means that transgender service members will have many restrictions placed on them for future service or current service in the U.S. military. Much remains to be determined as to how this is going to be put into effect. But the language in the executive order, Terry, was very strong. And if you bear with me one second, I'm just going to read something here. It talked about that it is expressing a false gender identity is divergent from an individual's sex, cannot satisfy the rigorous standards necessary for military service. And it adds that adoption of a gender identity is inconsistent with an individual's sex conflicts with a soldier's commitments to an honorable, truthful, and disciplined lifestyle. And that is the assertion that is made in this executive order over and over again, essentially, that the lifestyle that the gender the choices being made are at odds with what it means to be a dedicated service member in someone fighting for one's country. So that's the argument that is being made, and this is where we are right now, where we have the Defense Department essentially working to try to figure out how they're going to implement this over the next 30 to 60 days.
So what's interesting about this, they did actually say what they were going to do. They reversed it. They basically sat there and said for all those that were bounced out, they say bounced out of the military, they resigned. For all those that resigned out of the military because they did not want to get the COVID vaccine shot, you are now being welcomed back with open arms. If Congress approves it, keep in mind, Trump can do all the executive orders he wants to, but until Congress actually comes together and approves it, that's not going to happen. So him and Pete Hegseth, which again, Congress does have control of the Senate and the House. Democrats are virtually powerless to do anything but sit there and watch the horror show. But yes, if it does go through Congress, if it does get approved, then yes, those that were released and thanked for their service could come back, could get their back pay instituted. Those that are transgender may find themselves removed from the military. And here's the thing I never understood. If an individual has decided that above all else, what they want to do is serve our country and even do the ultimate sacrifice, I can care less about their gender. I can care less about their pronouns. And I will address them how they want to be addressed, but I can care less because, well, one, they're serving our country. Two, they deserve our respect. And three, I can care less about their gender. I could care less whether they're binary or non-binary, whether they align themselves with he or she or they. I could care less. But it is amazing to me that those who served, although, not to knock the National Guard, but it's Pete Hegseth, who believes I should have a warrior mentality, but the guy's never really actually seen a firefight, is going to sit there and say, we need to have a warrior mentality back in the armed forces. And in doing so, welcoming back those who are not vaccinated, which would be a problem because, again, which we'll get to RFK in a minute, but bringing back non-vaccinated people introduces a new strain of possible outbreaks. And you want to do this within our fighting force? Yeah, that's really, really dumb. At the same time, Trump, again, he has to say those campaign promises, we have to get the trans people out of our military. So it's not so. Here's the thing about it. The fact that we are getting that they want to get trans people out of our military kind of defeats the whole thing of we support the troops, we love the troops. No, you don't. You don't support the troops. You don't love the troops. The VA is still a mess. Troops still come back messed up. At the same time, suicide rates are still up among armed veterans. And you're going to sit there and tell me you guys love the troops, but you're bringing back unvaccinated soldiers and at the same time getting rid of those that decided they want to serve, but because of their gender or because of what they want to be seen as or known as, oh, well, we can't have that in our military. How very Russian of you. Moving right along, like I said, I talked about RFK. Again, a man who's had brain leeches, a man who has killed bears, who left bears in Central Park, who took heads of whales home for study. may be profiting off an anti-vaccine lawsuit. Yeah, I'm sure there's no conflict of interest there.
Tomorrow, as he tries to secure his bid to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Among other things, he's expected to face questions about whether he'll push to upend access to vaccines or some processed food. ABC News senior national reporter Ann Flaherty has more on those confirmation hearings. And we got a glimpse into Kennedy's finances last week in his public disclosure forms. What stuck out to you there?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. You know, anybody can look at these disclosure forms. They're on the public website of OGE.gov. According to what he disclosed to federal ethics officials, Kennedy made millions of dollars. Most of it was from his own law firm. He made about $9 million there. He also made money off book publishing. But one of the more interesting pieces of his financial disclosure was that he gets these referral fees, sending essentially plaintiffs, people, families, to other law firms. And he refers them so that they can sue on the grounds of, say, a vaccine lawsuit. So one of the things that we learned last week was there is an ongoing lawsuit against Merck, and that he was a central player in this lawsuit. He says that he still stands to earn some money from these referral fees so long as the U.S. government isn't a party. And right now this is moving through civil court, so the federal government is not involved. So he could essentially stand to make money off of this anti-vaccine lawsuit, even though he would be confirmed as health secretary. I'm not sure that we've ever seen that before.
So what are the top issues lawmakers are expected to press him on?
So I'll just leave it there because, again, guys, the fact of the matter is that this is the man who swears up and down about vaccines, who says we don't really need a lot of them, that vaccines, they still claim vaccines cause autism, although extensive research has said otherwise. But, anti-vaxxers in science, you know how they are. But this man makes money off lawsuits for those that go against companies that produce them. And how is this not seen as a conflict of interest? This man literally goes out and says, hey, I don't think Americans need that many vaccines. No, I am not trusting a guy that has his brain leeches. I am not trusting a guy that sounds like he needs a throat lozenge, lemon tea, and a Ricola every 5 seconds. I'm not trusting you. You're not qualified to basically institute health policies for the United States. I'd rather trust a doctor. I'd rather trust a director of health. I'd rather trust somebody that actually has, experience. But again, another person picked by Trump, another person still making money, another person that is basically in the way of, well, let's kind of be honest, shouldn't really be in a position of where he can harm others. Harm yourself. Do all that you want to. But again, shouldn't be in a position, but still making money anyway. And yet, how is that not seen as a conflict of interest is beyond me. But here what else is beyond me. My backward state of Tennessee. Representative Andy Ogles has introduced a resolution to amend the Constitution to allow a president to serve 3 terms. Now, currently, the 22nd Amendment only allows an individual to run for 2 terms. That's it. You get 2 runs as president. That's it. That's all you get. Andy Ogles is basically kissing the ring or trying to say, here, Trump, look at me, introducing a constitutional amendment to allow a 3rd term. Here's the scary part about that is, guys, keep in mind, Republicans run the House and the Senate. We have a Republican administration, a Republican presidential administration. The scary part about this is that could actually get passed. It could get through the House. It could get through the Senate. And you don't think for 1 second Trump's going to lick his lips and go, I can be here another 4 years? Do you remember when I sat there, for all those that were watching Frack, that follow my podcast, do you remember when I sat there and I said, when Trump turned around and sat there and told people, hey, vote for me, you'll never have to vote again. Here's the scary part. That could actually happen. And even more so, it becomes a thing that, well, if you thought the next 4 years were bad, do you really want to hear 8? considering Trump lives that long, just saying. But again, we laugh at these things, but the fact of the matter is, it could possibly happen. And again, Andy Ogles is doing the same thing that Lindsey Graham did when Trump first ran for president. He was Trump's cheerleader until Trump noticed him and hoped he would take him to prom. That's all this man is doing. But again, my home state of Tennessee, progressively ass backwards when it comes to the state legislature. But moving right along, guys, I wanted to cover this story as well because some actual good news. Amazon store bought Whole Foods not too long ago, and now there is a union at Whole Foods. I wonder how this can go.
Whole Foods and the first unionized store in Amazon's grocery chain. Andrew Dimbert is here with what this means for Amazon employees and unionizing across the country. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning. It'll be the grocery chain's first ever union after workers at a Whole Foods in Philadelphia successfully voted to form one. Staffers opting to join the United Food and Commercial Workers Union in large part because they say they want better pay, improved schedules, and fair workloads. It's the first successful unionizing effort at a Whole Foods since Amazon bought it for over $13 billion back in 2017. And the company has faced a growing number of unionization efforts and talks ever since. The Jeff Bezos-owned giant has tried to fend off attempts at labor organizing by not just Whole Foods stores, but by delivery drivers and warehouse workers, with some employees even going on strike. Last year, Amazon workers at a warehouse in Canada did successfully unionize, only to learn their facility, along with all Amazon warehouses in Quebec, would be shut down permanently. And after a years-long battle, workers at an Amazon fulfillment center in North Carolina are finally set for a union vote next month. Similar union progress was made by workers in New York's Staten Island location, but they say Amazon has since refused to come to the bargaining table. As for the Philadelphia Whole Foods voting to unionize, the company says it's disappointed by the outcome, saying in part it offers competitive wages and other benefits such as 401k plans. Guys.
So what's so interesting about this is I am a big fan of unions. Unions work. Unions have actually got, because of unions, we have 40-hour work weeks, we have PTO, we have paid leave, although we really should have more maternity and paternal leave, but that's here nor there. But there's a lot of things that we have thanks to unions. And corporations, of course they hate unions. Corporations will be the first people to talk about, oh, you can come to us. We can talk to you. We're like a family. I.e., any corporation that tells you we're like a family, effing run. Because they are not. The only family they believe in is the mob. And trust me, they have a whole different definition of family there. But the fact that Whole Foods, again, whenever it comes to these people wanting to form unions, it always comes down to the same things. We want better pay, better working conditions. And again, there's that word again, better pay. If corporations do believe that these workers have it so well, why do every worker always say we're not getting paid enough? And it's true. So yes, it does suck that Amazon has legalized their way, especially in Canada, so that if they did try to unionize there, that, unfortunately would cause the closure of multiple plants. However, we did see Amazon did successfully unionize in New York, along with Whole Foods unionizing there. The thing about Amazon is they have been caught union busting again and again and again and again, and they've only paid fines. I wish for the Department of Labor, whoever that person may be, because they're not exactly confirmed as of yet. But I wish in a perfect world that corporations did actually get criminal punishment for labor busting. If you don't like it, pay the workers. Give them what they ask for. Because Amazon does this all the time. Oh, we give our benefits on day one. We have competitive wages. You know what the idea of competitive wages is? Almost for every corporation, every company does this. And HR is out there. You can lie all you want to, but this is what you guys do. You guys look at the average median income of wherever you decide to put your said business, and you go maybe $5,000 to $6,000 more. So you can sit there and say, we're paying more than the average median income. I will literally use my home state of Tennessee as an example. If the average median income in the average median income in Tennessee is $45,000 to $50,000, roughly. Amazon may turn around and say, oh, well, we'll pay people $52,000 to $55,000, depending on what job you go for. So we can sit there and say, we have competitive wages. We'll give you these benefits. We'll give you 401ks, which if you're looking at the stock market right now, not really worth a lot. That being said, this is what they say. Oh, well, why would you unionize? Because you guys hate when people step up in numbers. You guys hate when workers get together and they turn around and they're like, no, you can't. You may fire all of us, but you hurt yourself in the long run. And that's what it used to be. Workers used to get together. And trust me, a lot of these unions we covered in the past. Kellogg's did it. John Deere did it. Texas Nurses Union did it. Texas Nurses had a union, and they did it with their hospitals down there. So we know that unions work. At the same time, guys, you cannot sit there and tell us that, again, if you're not in a union, be in one. It is way too easy for corporations that will close doors and they will call it a business decision, but yet they always have record profits. All these corporations that complain about unions always have record profits. We've had a great year. Our CEO gets another $50 million in income while your average worker has to struggle. So yes, if you are part of a union, please join one or make one. At the same time, you will get a lot more. You will get a lot more than what you bargained for being in a union than being by yourself. Because guess what? When you're by yourself, it's too easy to get rid of you. So I'm just saying. Now, this does kind of coincide with my last story before we get to our feel-good segment, that Bridgestone, Nashville, Tennessee, a Bridgestone plant, is closing their tire plant in their Laverne area. This means that 700 people will be without jobs very soon. The thing about this is Bridgestone, of course, whenever it comes to this, because it's not only just the Laverne, Tennessee area that's going to be closing, it's also going to be the one in Des Moines, Iowa, that'll be closing theirs as well, because, they're trying to say that we're trying to restructure. And again, this is coming from a company that says, well, we're trying to restructure to keep the company afloat. Didn't Bridgestone just report a good profiting year? See, it amazed me so that these companies that are in post-pandemic areas always seem to have this issue of, well, we have to reduce, to keep the company afloat. And yet you had record years. So which one is it? So this is why I always say, guys, unionize, because you will see companies close and they never, here's the thing about company, and not to be too political, because I also sit there and say it's about 2-week notices, not to give them. A company will not give you a 2-week notice when they let you go. Work when you want to work. And at the same time, if you decide that today is the day, hey, just don't hurt anybody. That's all I ask. But again, Bridgestone reporting that they've had a good profitable year, but still letting over 700 individuals go. That's 700 individuals that now have to find jobs. But yeah, miss me with the we take care of our people like family bullshit. But moving right along, guys, I did want to get to our Feel Good News segment, because usually how right here we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom since I make you faith humanity. But hey, it's Wednesday, hump day tomorrow, which is Friday, which is Thursday. We want to leave you guys out some good notes, some good vibrations, and we'll do just that with these 2 good stories. This man right here, Baltimore Ravens tight end Mark Andrews. If you did follow the game last Sunday, some may say that he's responsible for the reasons why the Ravens are in the Super Bowl. That being said, it's just a game. However, Bills fans have proven that, you know what, we can at least do something for this. Now, again, for Mr. Andrews, who does actually supports a foundation for diabetes, Bills fans, or I should say Bills Mafia, got together and raised over $100,000 for diabetes research, who again goes to the same foundation that Mark Andrews does support. And again, I just love the fact that they sat there and said, you know what, it's a game, but at the same time, we want to turn around and we want to support what you support. So again, when it comes to the game, guys, it's not all bad. Sometimes there actually are good moments where people of opposite teams can actually come together and do something. That to me is still cool that some people do that. But again, if you want to actually know what that foundation was, it was the it was the National Diabetes Awareness, for all those that are wondering. So again, this is also a man, because Mark Andrews is also diabetic. He's type 1 diabetes, so it is near and dear to him. And still cool that they're doing this, although initially it was set up as a GoFundMe for Mr. Andrews, but he decided he wanted to donate this to charity because, again, still cool that Bills Mafia fans want to show some solidarity. Wow. Words are escaping me right now. The other video I got, guys, is of a man, Mr. Alan Brooks, who promised his mother that he would finish college no matter how long it took him. Well, at 60 years old, he can say that he graduated.
She was with me every step of the way. Even though she passed on, she left me right there to just cross the finish line. In 1982, I applied to Alabama A&M University, and I was accepted. I come in on a band scholarship. I was only committed to the band, and I allowed myself to make bad grades here and bad grades there, and I got to a point to where I had to leave school. I had to get a real job to support myself. Out of that, I started living, and years later, my mom, she always would say to me, "I wish you would go back to school one day." And I said, "Mom, one day I'm gonna do it." But as I got closer, it seemed like things started getting harder. And then eventually we lost my mom.
What broke me the day that she passed was, just going through that emotion of her passing. And then I instantly switched my mind to like, oh my God, my dad is in his last class. Like, how is he going to be able to finish this? Like, when his sole purpose in doing this was for her.
I switched gears and said, Mom is still with me. There's no way I'm gonna stop. I got a call from the registrar's office, and they said, Mr. Alan Brooks, they said, are you ready to graduate? And I said, I am. They said, well, we want to let you know that you're going to be our oldest graduating senior. Will you give us permission to announce your name? Right at that moment, I was like, oh my God, Mom, this is something.
I have people messaging me saying how they are currently in school and they're struggling, and this gave them motivation to just push through and see through. I've had messages where older parents that were really just stuck in the unknowing of if they wanted to go back. Even for myself, I started and I haven't had the chance to finish. But then when you have, someone like my dad who, really faced all odds and went through head on and finished that, it's like he gave you another vision to see that anything truly is possible and there is no time on it.
That right there is cool. I mean, that's something that's just an accomplishment in itself. That, if being a college graduate, trust me, it is not an easy road, especially doing it twice. This man, though it may take him a little bit longer, he can call himself a graduate, and definitely congratulations to him, sir. So still some feel-good moments. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. Thank you all for liking, for watching, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Please bear with me. We're still working out the kinks of this new format. So if the audio was delayed, the video was delayed, please tell me. We're still working on that. If I sound okay, like I said, still working on it. Thanks for hating it. Thanks for rocking out with us, though. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here, guys. I do want to talk about Blurred Station. Yes, I keep saying this, guys, about having our own streaming, have our own table, things that we can enjoy with. Why? Because, well, we made Tubi money. Tubi is great, but Tubi has been owned by the same guy who owns Fox. And that tells you a lot, because now Tubi is well worth over $100 million. And that's based off our viewership, our content, and most importantly, our dollars. The same thing can be said with Blur Station. We can do that for ourselves. Simply, if you go to blurstation.com, select the Join Now button. From the Join Now button, select the Blur's Eye View Affinity membership. From there, you can select myself, Block Spartan, or anybody else there. It is $10.99 a month to stream Blur Station. Blur Station can be seen from anywhere, from smart devices to your television to your computer. Wherever you can see it, you would love it there. And trust me, there is so much content on Blur Station. But again, all of that goes back to us. That is the reason why this is important. So definitely check out blurstation.com. Also go to alwayspressrecord.com online or APR TV on the app. Why? Because shows like How the Frack Got Here can be seen on there. And again, another table to where our viewership, our patrons, and most importantly, our dollars go to. Definitely check out APR TV, alwayspressrecord.com, either on Roku or any smart device. And again, chip in, man. That's all we ask. Outside of that, guys, runforoffice.org. I have sat there and told you guys, you want to know how Moms of Liberty did it? You want to know how the napkins did it? You want to know how the Trump cult did it? They did it this way. If you do feel the call for public service, please go to runforoffice.org, put in your address. It will take you step by step to how you can apply, how to get on the ballot, and go from there and run. We need more people now than ever to serve our cities, our states, not just the federal level. Why? We've seen what happens when the inmates run the asylum. We don't want a repeat of this. We always have to be active. So again, if you feel the call, definitely go to runforoffice.org. And again, we need people badly. Aside from myself, guys, you can find me Black_Spartan 615. If I could do this better, I would. On the socials, I do usually talk about more than just current events. I do try to talk about everything else. The only thing I ask is don't make it weird. Again, don't make it weird. Not that hard. Don't want to block you. At the same time, guys, with everything that is going on, please be aware. The whole point of this podcast is to inform. We're not out here to sway opinions. We let the facts do that themselves. But at the same time, guys, be informed, be active. It is going to be, if we haven't already figured this out, from the end of January, which feels like January just did 90 and a 55. That's how fast January went past us. But if January is any indication of what we can expect for these next 4 years, buckle down and lock in, because unfortunately Democrats are powerless against a overwhelming majority. But again, we can definitely take care of ourselves, protect your peace, protect your mental, look after each other. That's all we can do outside of join the resistance. But the last thing I'll say about How the Frack Got Here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information allowed you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a perspective that goes along with it. We do better as a society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, hopefully one day, electing our first Black woman to be the first Madam President. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. Literally, we're seeing Nazis and fascism again. History repeating itself. That's why we keep asking, why do we elect different politicians to Congress, but still the same old game? Why does everything go up on our paycheck? And most importantly, how the frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Please take care of yourselves and each other. I promise we'll get through this. Peace.